Welcome to the eighth lecture of ethical issues for modern computer professions. As we have already seen, unprecedented access to users' personal data, supplemented with unprecedented power of modern technology to analyzing them. Data ownership and privacy related issues are creating some kind of undesirable disturbances in the social fabrics, and that is leading towards a kind of chaotic ecosystem where individual users are hardly in a position to exercise any control over their personal data. In fact, a very little known about how right to privacy should be defined in the current context. On the other hand, bona fide business organizations are also finding it very difficult to address the dilemma of choosing an appropriate portion of the available potential of the modern data analysis techniques that can extract best out of this data that has been collected without compromising users' privacy. Moreover, with the unprecedented consequences that are cropping up due to ubiquitous applications of these emerging technologies, existing regulations or law are found to be incapable of addressing legal disputes that are arising out of these emerging issues. The intentional or unintentional privacy breaches that we have witnessed. Initial attempts of ad hoc amendments were also not working well. Now, as a result, lawmakers across the globe had started to come up with a new set of laws or regulations that can appropriately cover these emerging issues we were discussing in past few lectures. So, main purpose of such privacy regulations is obviously enable individual users to understand their right to privacy in the present context, help them to exercise some control over their personal data, and to obtain some kind of legal support to protect any illegitimate use of their personal data. Another purpose of privacy regulations is to offer a level playing field to all bona fide business organizations dealing with such data. Because in the absence of such regulations, such bona fide organizations as part of their best ethical practices to protect users' privacy, exercising a conservative approach maybe towards executing the power of modern technology available to them. And they were sometimes found to lose the market to some organizations which were involved in aggressive use of these technologies without providing much respect to users' privacy. So these are the two purposes of coming out with new set of regulations to address these emerging issues. Mainly, there are several other, but these are the major issues we will discuss. Now, here in this course, we will discuss two such regulations. One is obviously global data protection regulations that is already in effect. That was enforced by European Union from 25th May 2008, and this is being already in effect. People are drawing much attention to this. And next, I will also try to discuss the proposed GDPR version of India, which is expected to be established as personal data protection law. It is currently, I mean, in last year it was introduced in the parliament after cabinet approval, and presently it is referred to a joint parliamentary committee for further analysis. And once it will be revised, and then maybe in near future it will established as law. Now, global data protection regulations. This GDPR has come up after a lot of deliberations inside European Union, and it was finally approved by the EU Parliament on 14th April 2016, and it was actually enforced from 25th May 2018. And I mean, this is very important because as a professional, you have dual responsibility. Like, you need to understand understand the right to privacy each user should have, and what are the privacy, global data protection regulations are saying about them. And at the same time, since you are supposed to work for organizations who will provide the services that are going to deal with users' private data, so you need to understand the technical nitty-gritties of these, so that you can devise your solutions, keeping in mind that will comply these regulations. So you can talk to many of your seniors that they are working for many organizations which are dealing with such data, and it is not necessarily that they are under purview of European Union or not. Nowadays, it has gained a lot of attraction worldwide, and when you will join such organizations, you will have to undertake rigorous training on global data protection regulations. So this is the official website which you can refer for detailed understanding of this particular protection. The regulations, the PDF documents along with several case studies are available. But I'll just try to discuss few major issues here. Okay. So first of all, we need to understand who does the GDPR affect. Actually, if you look into the GDPR document, you'll find that any organizations that are subject, that are dealing with data where the users or data generators, or here it is termed as data subject, they are residing in the European Union, regardless of the organization's location. If your organization is dealing with personal data of users who belongs to the European Union countries, then you are bound to abide by these regulations. As I mentioned, even if you are not, if your organization is not part of that European Union, they are not dealing with data of European Union, still people are actually taking GDPR as a reference document and try to comply with that. So this is a present practice, because many other countries, they don't have such regulations yet. So informally, everyone is now trying to comply with GDPR, and even the countries who are trying to come up with their own such data protection law or regulation, they are also referring a lot to this GDPR, because this is the first serious attempt. Now it's all about, from user's perspective, it is protection of personal data. Now the law actually is designed to protect personal data regardless of the technology, be it manual or automated. Okay. So it doesn't matter how the data is stored, maybe in an IT system through their conventional and emerging techniques, through video surveillances like through CCTV camera or other stuffs, or simply on paper. Now, first of all, we need to understand, because that was not yet defined, what is personal data. So according to GDPR, any information that relates to an identified or identifiable living individual, directly or indirectly, any information that directly identify or indirectly identify a person uniquely is personal data. It may be a single piece of information, like we have already seen: your name, your address, your email address, phone number, or a collection of different pieces of information, which individually may not be apparent to uniquely identify a person, but when collectively they are considered together, they can uniquely identify a person. So those are also be part of the personal data. So personal data, I mean, so de-identification may not always um, uh, make your data to be non-personal. I mean, as you have seen, there are different mechanisms through which we can indirectly identify a person even after um, the data, personal data, has been de-anonymized by conventional techniques. So if it is not properly de-anonymized, even after uh, anonymization or encryption, it may still be considered as personal data if it appears that by using some technique indirectly, an identity of an user can be revealed from such data. So examples of personal data, maybe as I have already mentioned some of them, but as per GDPR, they have also given some example like name and surname, your home address, email address, which actually identify a person, not, I mean, uh, even if the domain is coming from your office address, but still, like my email ID, devas@csc.nitpg.ac. It is personal data because that uniquely identifies my identity. So an identification card number, ID number, we all have some identity card, and a unique number is given. Internet protocol address, advertising identifier of our phone, and data held by hospital or doctor, which could be symbol that uniquely identify the person. So there are two more things like geolocation data obtained through your mobile phone or the apps that tracking or geolocation, and cookie ID. So this to a cookie ID I will discuss later separately, because that is a very important thing in case of our digital life. Okay. Now, what is not personal data? I mean, we should clearly have an idea as a technocrat to be part of such development, which will be dealing with personal data. We should have a clear idea that which are to be considered as personal data and which are not. So, according to GDPR, personal data that has been rendered anonymous in such a way that the individual is not no longer identified, and that is called the proper anonymization, if it is possible at all, because many researchers are doubtful that it is at all possible or not. But in any case, if it is so-called irreversible, that after anonymity, I mean, make it de-identified, that data cannot identify by any means, then it will be a non-personal, not personal data. So, and like, yeah, our company registration number, it is not a personal property, it's an organizational property. And a company email address which identifies a company, not a unique individual. like maybe some helpline number, an email address of some helpline or something like that. Now, GDPR also defines sensitive personal data, which I was mentioning as critical personal data. As I mentioned, there are some portion of personal data which are very critical. I mean, rampant disclosure of such data may lead to discrimination or many unwanted harm to individual users. So, this GDPR also recognizes racial or ethnic origin, political belief, uh, trade union memberships, genetic data, anything that could lead to some kind of unwanted discrimination and or some societal harm is sensitive personal data. And GDPR has laid down several articles in their regulation to handle sensitive personal data collection and the processing of sensitive personal data separately. Now, processing of sensitive data is prohibited except under certain derogation, such as, I mean, this data subject means the um, whose personal data is it, who is generator basically, generator of that data. In GDPR terminology, it is data subject or user has made user sensitive data manifestly deliberately. Yes, after knowing every consequence, he or she has deliberately made it public. He has given explicit consent, and this explicit consent obviously should be informed. And there are some exceptions where even with users or data subjects explicit consent, you cannot process the data. I will show you later what are there. And also there are some forced by any other law, like there may be some exceptions given by authorities to some government agencies or some others in exception, like in order to address crime or something like that, under proper judicial guidance, this processing of sensitive personal data may be allowed in exceptional consequences, circumstances. Now, there is a concept of imbalanced relations that I was talking about, that exception where even with the consent you cannot process, you are not supposed to process, like employer-employee relations. I mean, many times it is basically an imbalanced relationship. If your employer asks for something, um, your consent to do or process something, which you may not be actually ready to give consent, but you know if you don't give consent, then it will actually lead to some kind of indirect harm to you, some loss, professional loss you may incur. So you may be just bound to provide that consent. So in that case, if in such a relation, such a scenario, if you later found that even if you have provided consent, but using your consent, your employer has done something which is harming your uh, social status or other part, reaching your privacy to a great extent, then you can refer to this regulation to get protection over that. And as an example, like if your employer um, ask all the employees to give their consent so that they want to install CCTV cameras in the corridors and the entrance to the bathrooms even, so that they can monitor your movements. Now the employer can't install CCTV even if the employees. I mean, this is not allowed. Even if they have asked your consent and you have provided the consent, but it won't be considered as, since this relationship imbalanced. So they cannot do this. They cannot install CCTV camera in front of the bathroom. That is actually leading to a privacy. I mean, this is working against right to privacy, basic right to privacy. Uh, but however, it is not always, I mean, it's not absolute. It is not always that in such a scenario of imbalanced relationship, there is no meaning of consent. Like if based on your consent, your employer is doing or using your sensitive personal data to offer you some benefit, then it is allowed. I mean, obviously, you won't uh, actually you will gladly accept such thing. Like suppose based on your data analysis using your sensitive data, they are offering some kind of discount or some kind of special allowances, then it is okay. So you have to understand the scenario where you can um, refer these regulations to challenge your employer or where you know. Now every user has right to object to processing their personal data. Like this your means the user. Okay. So data subject at any point of time may ask a company or organization that was collecting his or her data against some service to stop processing his or her personal data for the purpose of direct marketing. Like most of the cases, that data is curated to come up with some personalized services and that are sold. Those products are sold to some advertising merchants or some other to for their business use. Now an user has right to ask the organization to stop that, and the company must comply with that without asking for it. So there is an example that a person bought 2 tickets to see uh, his or her favorite band play live to an online ticketing company. He or she inform the online ticketing service company that he or she don't want to receive further advertising material. The company should stop processing his or her personal data for direct marketing. And obviously, he or she should not get emails, this kind of promotional emails. Users has the right to do that. And there is an interesting concept called right to be forgotten. Like uh, you have given some of your personal data, and later point of time you may realize that after a long period you may realize that data is actually harming you. That data maybe they are stale or old data since they are not updated. For an example, like scenario, suppose you were some kind of defaulter to a loan sometimes, and that you had shared that data. Now it may show up, and after a long, you have settled that issue. After some. You have repaid with possibly with fine and settled the issue with that your that organization who has given you loan. But since this old data, you were part of an defaulter list, may later uh, be used to deny loan or some kind of other financial assistance to you. So the users have every right to ask that organization who is storing that um, old data which is not having proper relevance now to erase uh, from his or her database so that cannot uh, utilize your and that cannot be misutilized to harm you. So this is a very interesting right that uh, GDPR is offering to data subjects or users. So it is a little bit complex to understand and implement also. So you should focus on this thing properly. Just like here is in this example, there are 2 or 3 example scenarios that are provided in GDPR site. I have uh, brought from them that in what scenario your this request to be forgotten, user's request to erase his or her data will be entertained or not. Okay, so a person has joined a social networking site. After a while, uh, he or she may decide to leave the networking site. Now, the data subject has the right to ask the company that is running the social networking site to delete all the personal data belonging to him, and that organization has to comply with that. Similarly, when a person do an online search using his or name and surname, the results show link company newspaper article. That the scenario I was talking about, that the newspaper dates back a number of years and is related to an issue, a real estate auction connected with debt recovery proceeding, and settled a long time ago. That is now irrelevant. If the data subject is not a public figure and his or her interest in having the article removed outweighs the general public interest, it is not conflicting with general public interest, so he or she can ask the organization to remove links to web pages including username and surname from the results, and it has to be compliant. Now there is one scenario where the request of erasure may not be entertained immediately. I mean, suppose you want to uh, close your account held with some bank. You had an account for several years. After some time, you realize that you will move to some other bank. You don't want to continue that. Now, you may ask the old bank to delete all your personal data, but that request may not be um, entertained immediately. I mean, there are some other factors in which such a case banks need to store this kind of information for a period of time. After that, the request may be served, but you cannot just ask the bank to immediately delete all data pertaining to you. This is not allowed. So this is one case where right, I mean, your right to be forgotten may not allow to force your bank or some organization to erase your data immediately. Now, so there are 2 things. I mean, the data collection aggregation and data processing. As you have already seen, the privacy-related issues are also dependent on data processing. So, what is data processing? I mean, GDPR says that it covers a wide range of operations performed on personal data, including by any means like automated or manual means. For example, collecting, recording, organizing or structuring data, storing, retrieving some kind of data, disseminating or erasing. There are many other type of data. These are the most common tasks that maybe when it is performed on personal data, it is considered to be uh, data processing according to GDPR. For example, I mean, access to consultation of the contacts database containing personal data, sending in promotional email, setting documents containing personal data, posting, putting photo of person on a website, storing IP addresses and MAC addresses, video recording by CCTV, many more. Now there is another kind of processing which is very important nowadays called consumer profile, like this personalized based ad and personalized based recommendations are basically coming through this consumer profile. Any form of automated processing of personal data that evaluates or analyze or predict certain personal aspects relating to a person. like performance, his or her performance at work, how uh, his just evaluate or predict his economic situation, the health, including some critical illness, personal preferences or choices, interest, reliability, behavior, location, movement, everything. So, in order to, I mean, in order to prevent the unregulated data processing and rampant consumer profiling in the name of this personalization based services, GDPR tries to impose some limits on such processing. So, as per GDPR, organization may process personal data only when they can demonstrate a legitimate business purpose, such as customer or employment relationship that does not conflict with consumers' right and freedoms. I mean, this is a little bit vague statement, and if you refer GDPR, you'll find it vague. I mean, so people are trying to coming up with their own interpretations, and lots of debates are going on. But the issue is, I mean, this is a complex issue you need to address, and GDPR has tried to start addressing that type of issues. I mean, they have actually acknowledged that this type of issues are there, and business organizations should look into that. So, I mean, hopefully, this will be revised and some sort of global perception will come later. Now, there are two more interesting things which are there in GDPR, which I'll just mention here, but I will discuss these things, the concepts in great detail when we come into these topics, because one is right to explanation. Right, as I have already mentioned briefly, that the opaqueness of this kind of modern technology we are using is presently is not properly explaining the decision or outcome. So people are now, I mean, just like in case of human decision, we always have some explanation that the person at the receiving end can ask for explanation, and human decision makers are always bound to provide some kind of explanation, which may or may not satisfy the person. But in case of this automated decision making, what we are seeing most of the cases, there is no explanation. I mean, it is only saying that it is like opaque thing. The technology is doing like that. You have to accept. So this is not a good way, and as the I mean, person at the receiving end are going to lose the trust on such systems or major stakeholders. So in order to keep the stakeholders' trust in these modern technologies, so we need to embed some kind of right to explanation. So, GDPR grants consumers the right not to be subject to the decision. Okay. So this is a very complex issue. I mean, on the one hand, uh, users or data subjects should have this right, but in order to practically implement that, it will be very, very challenging. In case of this modern technology like deep learning and many other interesting and very, very powerful technologies that are coming, that are really not able to explain right now. So we need to, I mean, rethink the development of such powerful technology a great deal in order to make them explain their decisions. So it will be very challenging to implement that. We'll discuss a lot in some future lectures. Similarly, bias and discrimination. So any kind of processing may lead to bias and discrimination. As you have seen some of the examples, and we'll see lot more examples in future. So, but GDPR organization must avoid discriminatory effect in automated decisions. So it is not always just uh, sufficient to uh, refrain yourself from using sensitive personal data. Even if you are not directly using sensitive personal data, your data analysis may lead to some bias and discriminations. Um, or we'll see, like sometimes the the very much need to implement a lucrative service is to handle sensitive personal data, but accordingly it may lead to some bias and discrimination. There are many different sources of bias and discrimination we'll discuss in